Hello there. The global economic crisis of 1975 gave Chancellor Helmut Schmidt and French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing the idea of a summit of the largest industrial nations to seek solutions. At the first meeting at Rambouillet Castle near Paris, the heads of state and government from France, Germany, the USA, Great Britain, Japan, and Italy came together. A year later, Canada completed the G7 for the next almost 30 years. The G7 initially included the 7 largest industrial nations in the world. Today, that is no longer the case. Italy and Canada have been ousted from the top 7 by China and India. However, economic power is no longer considered the most important link between the member states. The shared values of the 7 democracies are gaining importance in the face of growing competition from autocracies like China and Russia. But just to make it clear one more time, those states that are in the G7 are the United States, Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Great Britain, and despite all the trouble in their government at the moment, of course, Italy. And that will remain the fact for a long time. The population of the G7 countries make up about 10% of the world's population, and the G7 countries generate 45% of the world's gross domestic national income, not domestic. The EU has also taken part in the meetings as an observer since 1977. The G7 have their origins in the informal group of 5 that met in the White House Library beginning March 25th in 73. The group was also called the Library Group because of the meeting point. It included the finance ministers and central bank governors of the USA, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. Japan also took part from September 1973. And as I said, finally in 1975, the French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, my French, and German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt launched the first World Economic Summit. The heads of state and government from Germany, France, Great Britain, Italy, Japan, and the USA met at a fireside chat at Rambouillet Castle. The group of 6 was born that time. The government exchanged ideas in small circles about the oil and financial crisis. The Bretton Woods system of fixed exchange rates had just collapsed. At the end of the meeting, they adopted a 15-point agreement. They also agreed to annual meetings under a rotating presidency. And finally, in 1976, Canada joined the group. In the founding years of 1975 and 1976, the G6 and G7 were respectively the 6th and 7th largest economies in the world in terms of gross domestic product. This is no longer the case, as I said, because China and India are ahead of Canada, the economically smallest G7 country in terms of gross domestic product. The G7 organized regular world economic meetings, the so-called G7 summits. It was originally planned that the politicians would exchange views there in personal talks on issues relating to the global economy and agree on common positions and goals. In the meantime, however, the topics of the G7 summit have expanded significantly. Foreign and security policy, as well as population development, health, education, environmental protection, climate, and fight against terrorism are also on the agenda. The G7 sees itself as a community of values. The members are committed to democracy, the rule of law, freedom, human rights, prosperity, and sustainable development. The decisions of the G7 are not legally binding, though. However, due to the political and economic weight of the G7 nations, they have an influence on many other nations and organizations. The summits are the culmination of the G7's work, but not the only activity. Meetings between experts and ministers take place throughout the year. The G7 nations coordinate their positions and initiatives in the various areas in working groups. The chief negotiators of the heads of state and government, the so-called Sherpas, prepare the topic for the summit or the topics. And shortly before the G7 summit, the foreign ministers of the member states meet and discuss foreign policy issues. All G7 outcomes are recorded in joint statements. In 1998, the group was expanded by 1 member. Russia was admitted, and hence the people talked of the G8. However, this only existed until 2013. Because of the Russian annexation of Crimea, the summit in Sochi in Russia on the Black Sea burst in 2014. Since then, the group has been called the G7 again. The merger is criticized because it is mainly made up of only the representatives of Western industrialized countries and therefore does not represent all regions or all stages of development in the world. The organization of the G7 is also criticized. The decision-making process is not transparent and the resolutions are often not implemented. Movements critical of globalization in particular are protesting against the G7 and fighting street battles with the police at the G7 summits. And of course, some people would say now, yeah, but there's also the G20. Yeah, they are. And I'll talk about them in another video. But I'll see you in my next video. Ich komme wieder.